Yeah, we went into looking at the issues, of course, about the world's now very fully online. We're doing everything that way. It's affecting every aspect of life, and there are a number of both bleak and happy pictures to paint. So we began by looking, of course, at dystopias, but if, John, you want to cover your dystopias and utopias, and then I'll summarize what the other folks said if they don't manage to make their way up here.
There was an overall feeling that the internet of about 1997 or 1998 was closer to utopia than we are today, that things have been moving more in the direction of dystopia in the sense of monopoly control over access to the internet. Many people only have one or two ISPs, and they all have the same kind of policies. They're all trying to get the power to spy on you and sell your information and overcharge you for throttling your access and stuff like that. We also have a set of monopolies at a much higher level in the protocol stack, and things like Google and Facebook, which have a large fraction of the market for advertising and actively spy on you everywhere you go on the web, trying to gather information about what you're up to in order to sell it to advertisers. We have issues from the internet and some of those platforms being used to try to manipulate people not only for advertising but also for politics and for trying to control who gets into power in various countries. And some of this is being done by political parties, some of it's being done by people working with political parties, some of it's being done by covert actors elsewhere in the world trying to manipulate other people's elections. You know, besides all of that stuff which we can see today, there's also, we've seen major electric power grids shut down in the Ukraine by cyber attacks, and it's certainly believable that our own infrastructure for things we depend on, like clean water, traffic lights, electric power, and things like that, could all fairly easily be taken out in the early phases or at convenient times during an actual war, which is a new development. You know, in past wars, it was very hard to reach into the warring countries' domestic environments and shut them down. It's become a whole lot easier because of the spread of the internet, and we don't have a lot of good policies or technical solutions to how to solve that. So. Somebody else want to talk about some dystopias?
First, I'll mention what I didn't mention first. That was John Gilmore, co-founder of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, founder of Cygnus Solution, or Cygnus Support. What was its name? Pioneer in doing support for open source software, and many other things in his life. And next to him, of course, we've already met Brewster, and we know all about Brewster. I want to ask you, John, though, about two sort of contradictory dystopias that were presented yesterday, which was some people were worried about over-centralization occurring, stagnation, everybody basically being in the same world, and other people were worried about too much splintering, too much division and balkanization of the network, division between people. How do you feel about the contrast between those? And we're going to speak for some of the people who haven't made it up on the stage yet. But it was interesting to see people seeming to say that there was a balance in the center we had to aim for, not too totally decentralized and not too totally unified.
I mean, the interesting part that came out of the whole discussion for me was in realizing how much of the issues around cyberspace are not particularly technical. They're much more sociological. They are about how humans interact through cyberspace than they are about what's the structure of cyberspace itself or the software or the protocols. As a general societal issue, yeah, you don't want to have a monolithic society where everybody looks the same way, everybody believes the same way, and anyone who disagrees with that is an outcast. You also don't want to have a society that is so diverse that people can't find common ground, can't even understand each other's languages, and naturally are distrustful and suspicious of each other. So, yeah, you'd like to find some common place where people can still find common language to talk about common issues and maybe reach understanding with each other without enforcing any kind of conformity.
Brewster, one of the things you said yesterday that I thought was quite interesting was the idea of altering the old phrase about the answer to bad speech is more speech and saying the answer to bad speech is more context. Do you want to start from that, or you start from wherever you want?
I found yesterday's conversations really quite interesting, and it was some of this centralized, decentralized religion thing doesn't apply terribly well. The sort of let's get 1997 back is sort of a little bit of a weird statement. I thought Danny O'Brien put a good turn on that, which is in the building of the scientific hypertext of all, right? So basically linking up the scientific literature, which is kind of one of the original dreams of the internet. We kind of got there, but we forgot about the emotion. And what we've seen really play out is, back in 1997, it was mostly a read-only web. It was fairly hard to write. But we now have a read-write web where you can basically type into things all the time. And it's made a very bizarre world, the Facebooks, right, of the world, right? When it was all WordPress, it was much more of a read-only kind of place. And now we have this read-write, and it's causing problems. John said, how do we stop incentivizing bad behavior? Right, so maybe there's these social contexts. Bryce, I thought was very, he wants to make a system. How do you make it so that your friends don't lie to you? And how do you then make it so you don't lie to your friends? His idea was make it so that there are associations or communities that know and trust each other towards building things, kind of like how our scientific associations have worked with smaller pockets of people. You might want to be able to read in from those groups, but it's not everybody coming to consensus in this idea. Wikipedia is trying to come up with a consensus on a particular subject. That's really hard to do across as broad a swath as they're trying. So then there's decentralized communities, whether the tech is decentralized or centralized. Actually, we didn't touch on that much at all.
He used this phrase that he thought every neighborhood should have its own intelligence agency. He was suggesting that, in fact, that the lens through which you understand the world would be better if it were your local group than if it were the global, the non-geographic lenses which we've been moving to.
I thought that was intriguing towards having these groups be kind of responsible for making things that are useful to them. It's neighborhoods again, a globe of villages, not a global village. I don't know, kind of intriguing, right? It's sort of really anti-narrative of what's going on. My approach towards the answer to bad speech is more context, is to try to give people an idea of what the heck they're looking at. So to the extent that we can peer into the results of other conversations or writings of others, try to help people get an idea of what these things are. Because everything looks kind of legitimate. Everything kind of looks like a newspaper from Denver. But some of those Denver newspapers really aren't Denver newspapers at all. And so how do you go and know what it is you should trust and not trust out of this? And I think it's moved beyond the, this is true, this is fake. It's just give me some of the evidence about what's going on to answer your question. Alex had an idea of we are running blind on building these systems with almost no feedback. I know the Facebooks of the world or other types of interactions. And so a new idea for me that came out of this was from Alex of can we go and build simulations to go and try out our systems with, just simulated user bots to go and find a kind of red team our social network our social media ideas. Internet Archive is involved in an experiment to build a decentralized web. This could go very, very wrong. And so is there a way that we can build simulations, structures at this more macro level? That was a new idea for me. So that's, I think, it's beyond red teaming and doing security exploit approaches, basically behavior problems in some of these systems that we're building and finding kind of too late of these things going kind of wonky wrong. Facebook, Twitter.
So John, you also emphasized the same thing I've said myself as well, that it's a great lament that the internet seems to only be funded or 95% funded by advertising, and that the identity systems that we've built on it have also ended up being very centralized and associated with these advertising companies, most of all. So what hope did you see for a way away from that?
Well, yeah, clearly one of the dystopian aspects is that what people see on the internet is influenced or controlled by the people who are paying to bring it to you. And that wasn't true of the internet back in the 1990s when it sort of burst into the public consciousness. What can we do to get back to that? Well, one suggestion that was made is to run browsers that don't show you ads. Another suggestion that I made was that people actually choose to pay for the resources that they're consuming over the web by buying things from the websites, so entering into a contract with them, buying a subscription to the newspapers or whatever, to give people who are providing information that you value a different economic model so they can turn away from the advertising model if they choose to.
A comment that this emotional internet that we've built, it used to be kind of a hypertext world that you can kind of go and figure out how to fix your PC or your Macintosh out there. But as Mary Lou Jepsen pointed out, we now have a coliseum, right? People want blood. People want this high emotional content, sort of engaging stuff, which tends to be fairly aggressive and horrible.
It's okay if you're the lion.
And we have a troll, we have a troll-powered internet now, right? A lot of the high-paid stuff is coming at us from paid perspectives that are just troll-ish. Well, okay, there's one is to try to ameliorate the trolls, try to identify them, get rid of them, or is there actually some way of using that or redirecting it? I think of Wikipedia as interesting experiment is, can you build a Taj Mahal with an army of ants, right? Can lots of people do small amounts of contributions and end up with something pretty freaking awesome? And Wikipedia is awesome at that. Can we apply that more broadly? I mean, if we've got trolls in abundance, can we do something awesome with it? So it's just a way of using the troll power of things people want to debate. Is there some way of turning that into a better internet as opposed to a destroyed system that wasn't designed to build around trolls?
Unfortunately, of course, all the utopian proposals face the problem of people deliberately set out to destroy them for whatever end, be it trolling for the lulz or be it targeted propaganda for political purposes. We have to face these active attackers, which we didn't actually think about a great deal in the early design of systems. In fact, I think to channel Danny a little bit when he was talking about this, and I don't know, Mary Lou, I know you went to Danny's private group, and I don't know if you have some extra input. I'd welcome you to give it if you have it. But basically, I think the way he put it very succinctly was to say that we didn't realize, we thought, well, it'll be kind of like the academic world with journals and people being nice and commenting and building new information. And we didn't realize that every statement written to the public seems to be as much about emotion as it is about information. And that we didn't design for a world like that. And the goal, not solved, is to see how we might. Now, Danny made this one fairly off-the-cuff proposal, but I actually liked it a lot if we could find a way to implement it. To use, are you all familiar, hopefully in this room, everyone is familiar with the idea of prediction markets. The idea that you can place bets on whether things are going to be true in the future or determined true, and then the people who bet correctly will get rewarded, and the people who bet incorrectly lose their funds. He thought it would be interesting to build a social network system where if you wanted to make a statement, you would have to also make basically a prediction market and bet on the truth of that statement. So if you forward an article saying that there is a child abduction ring running in the non-existent basement of a pizza restaurant managed by Hillary Clinton, other people would probably try and place prediction market bets that's not true, and you'd have to make those bets, or what you saw would be effectively downvoted and not promoted nearly as much. So the idea that you might be able to take people's monetary interests and say, if you really want to believe what you're saying, if you know what you're saying is true and you want to get it out, no problem, you'll actually make money from it. And if what you want to put out is stuff that isn't true, obviously you need oracles that can in the end determine whether these things are true or not, and that has to be part of a system. Anyway, it was actually one of the few novel ideas that I've seen, and I liked that we were getting to some novel ideas.
One thing I realized being on that panel is we're very early in the stages of trying to build systems to coordinate group actions. Networks that have more than a few hundred computers on them, or maybe more than about 10,000 people, have only existed for 20 or 30 years, and we don't really know, how to empower small groups to get things done, how to empower large groups to make hard decisions. I think there's an awful lot of work that sort of crosses many disciplinary boundaries.
If I may, actually, one of the questions that's just been handed to me on a card asks very much about that. They're asking about the relationship between our utopian visions of a cyberspace world and the physical lived-in world. Are they going to be divorced? Are they going to be closer together? What relationship will they have?
We've been talking some of the social aspects and going and but we've also got cyberspace encroaching on our world. 1997, the internet started by sounding for most people. And then it's laptops that are always on, then it's cell phones that are glued to your face. And so we have that awesome Facebook world. But now it's starting to be our cars and the rest. So we have cyberspace encroaching more and more of our world. And there was issues that were brought up around automated robotic enforcement of rules. So we're starting to see governments come in and put in real limitations on what can be discussed out there on the net because of problems that are coming up, or institutions that are offended with copyright things or whatever. There's a bunch of different enforcements that are coming into cyberspace, but that's going to potentially go steps further into our lives. I'm quite conscious, my wife bought a Tesla. That thing it's a driving iPad. It is reporting back, it's a connected device. Somebody else knows everywhere I am and every time I've hit the gas pedal, and it does push software changes to my device, which is my car, which is freaking frightening, and but it's kind of cool in that sort of way. So the boundaries of cyberspace are changing. So how do we go and build it so that it works better? Let's use these online laptop or phone-based things as experiments, because by the time it's controlling my heart implant, let's get it debugged a little bit better.
All right, we just have time for, I think, a quick summary, and I just want to make sure that the salient things that we wanted to cover from yesterday, Brewster, you already got to address one of your common themes, which is your love for 501c3s and B Corps and so on compared to traditional corporations and how they act as slow AIs in the world. So we'll get to one other question here, which was, has seeing the internet grow from very little to what it is today taught you anything about human nature?
I've been surprised at how slow existing institutions have adapted to the opportunities of a new technology. That we got newspapers online in the early 90s. It took forever to get music to even go online, and it was kicking and screaming. Books still are not really adapting well. Universities look very much the same as they did. Hospitals aren't run terribly differently. That we have, it's been slow going. People say, oh, everything's speeding up. It's like, doesn't seem like that to me. These institutions are basically aching to be replaced. It's easier to replace the whole taxi system than have them actually respond to an app. So that's been sort of a surprise for me. We're getting towards much more surveillance going on by all sorts of things. We're giving digital trails. So how do we deal with this? I mean, it's happening. So is it good or bad is a little bit of a issue. If we could make some tools so that it's easier to do, if you didn't want to collect information that you don't have to, I think that could help. Those that would like to just dial it back. We don't need to have fast tracks go and track everywhere we go with our car to just pay every time we go through a traffic thing.
I got mine in the Mylar bag. You don't put yours in the Mylar bag?
I put mine in a Mylar bag. I'm not common in that. So is there mechanisms that we can go and build some tools to allow it to dial back? Then we also need to go and dial back some of the government urges. I think we have a euphoria of big data. It's like, oh my God, the big data is awesome. It's gold in them our hills. Let's collect it. We're idiots if we're not using it well. And a lot of this is just, it's nuclear waste. It's really problematic stuff to be collecting in the first place, but it's human nature to try to hoard some of this. So bad, but it's coming anyway. How do we go and help people self-regulate? How do we help sort of keep our governments under control from doing more Snowden-like things? Not what Snowden did, what Snowden revealed.
But yes. So I, of course, was moderating yesterday, and I didn't do my own individual session, but to sum up, one of the central issues that I think we were all dancing around, in fact, maybe it's even too current, and we wanted to go further. But it's the thing which is bothering my brain, and probably everyone else's brain has been this for a long time, that these unanticipated things, and in very particular, the ability to use computer networks, which we hoped would make everybody communicate and share information with each other, and to turn them into propaganda tools, to turn them into very sophisticated propaganda tools beyond what we imagine, to the point that it could significantly alter the world's propaganda, or not, it's the world's political landscape, is of concern for me in two ways. Of course, the effect of the propaganda, but secondly, I'm now starting to see a serious movement against pretty dearly held principles of free speech and the First Amendment, growing among even people who were serious fans, people like Tim Wu writing essays against the First Amendment. And this is actually one of the great crises I see, is finding a way out of this. We have to find a way out of this, but we also have to find a way out of it without giving up the things that we valued and held before we built the network and as we built the network. And I don't have, unfortunately, a utopian answer for that yet. We were looking for some of them, and a couple of interesting ideas came forward. We do need to make it so that there is some shame in spreading false information, but not too much shame so that you're willing to take it back. I have noticed that people almost never, I'm one of those assholes who, when you post fake information, I put the Snopes link up in the comments, and I find that almost never does this cause the people to say, my bad, and take it down, which is what I would hope I would do if someone did it to me, but I'm never wrong. So we need a way to make that work. We need a way to make people understand that the world works this way. So these are some of the challenges. We had, John, you had a comment before we go to the one?
Actually, I want to bring back an idea from 20 years ago at the Foresight Institute, which was to build a science court that people could put up alleged facts, and other people could debate them, and it would structure those debates to come out with an answer, is this a fact or isn't this a fact, and then build propositions based on those facts and attempt to make policy judgments that were based in fact. So far, no one has built one of those that works, but it was a goal of Foresight to try to catalyze such things. And that's in the category that I was talking about of finding better ways for large groups to collaborate. Foresight was originally created in order that the public would make educated choices about how to deal with nanotechnology, which is likely to bring huge positive and negative impacts. And it's still struggling to be able to catalyze ways that a whole society can deal with disruptive change.
One brief question. Someone wants to point out Tim Berners-Lee's SOLID project. I am familiar with it because, of course, it's stolen from my data deposit box project. No, it's not. They came up with the ideas independently, but I do, of course, believe they're good ideas. So lots more issues to discuss on this and lots more for this afternoon. And we are now going to lunch. Allison, if you want to add more to that.